Okay, hello. It's June the 10th today. It's a rainy, gray day, but at least we don't have smoke like you guys on the East Coast. I guess that's a bit of digression. There is a lot of fires going on right now, and I have to say, I didn't like make any predictions for fires, but if in my Sun Uranus video that I was doing a while back, I sort of alluded to the fire of freedom, and the wildness or whatever, the wildness of Uranus, and I don't know. Just today, the focus of today's video is going to be on Pluto. Pluto is at the 0 degree of Aquarius right now, and it's about to make a retrograde ingress into Capricorn. And that basically happens tomorrow. Now, this may be a more simple video. I don't have a lot of fancy, complex ideas, at least not going into it. Just to give you some dates, that Pluto is retrograde, and it will continue to be retrograde until October the 11th. And then it will station direct, and it won't be until January 21st, 2024, that we get Pluto back into Aquarius. And then also, interestingly enough, I made a note here that if you look up the chart for January 21st, 2024, the Sun will be conjunct Pluto, and there'll be Sun-Pluto conjunction as we ingress into Aquarius, which I thought was interesting. I mean, that should make for an interesting video next year or whatever. But there's certain important things that, like the last couple of videos I was doing was about a T-square between whatever. You had the fixed sign T-square. Well, as soon as Pluto goes into Capricorn, technically we don't have much of a fixed sign T-square anymore, because Pluto in Aquarius was the Aquarius side of that T-square. And as I speak, the Venus-Jupiter square is part of that. That's the only thing that's really that strong right now. I'm not going to do this thing where I throw up a chart, because I would have to edit it in afterwards. But right now, like I said, Pluto's at 0, Jupiter's at 0.5 of Taurus, Venus is at 0.4 of Leo, so you've only got a 1 degree orb on that Venus-Jupiter conjunction today. So Venus and Jupiter is still very strong right now. And Mars is at 12 degrees of Leo. So there's a 12 degree orb between Mars and Pluto, right? And there's something about, I have to say, my last video, I think I was kind of going off the heavy Plutonian dynamic, because Venus was making a perfect opposition to Pluto around that time. But there's also the whole Mars-Venus tension. Venus and Mars have a good 8 degrees distance, which is like they're within range that they're probably affecting each other somewhat, but it's not super strong right now. And so basically, what I'm trying to say is there's this kind of drama of this gnarly T-square between between Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto, and that is really winding down right now. And so I think the good news about this, anyways, is that particular astrological dynamic, which I feel like, I mean, this is the other thing too, is another reason why I shut down my current events astrology page, is that honestly I think other people are doing a better job than I am. Like, I'm not really paying attention to the news that much, but I saw things like ammunitions explosions, and the wildfires, and all this sort of the war in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, I don't want to look at that too closely, but all that stuff, when you have the god of war and Zeus, Zeus was like the patriarchal thunderbolt throwing, like, macho god. Like, you put that together with Zeus's brother, the lord of the underworld, Hades, the god of death, or whatever, the afterlife, and it's all a bit of a mess, right? But at least right now we just have Venus squaring against Jupiter, which may mean a bit of overindulgence, maybe a bit of well, that's not what this video is about. The point, though, is that Pluto is retrograding into Aquarius, and to give you a bit more of a closer idea of what that means, I had been thinking along the lines of Decan rulership recently. There is this thing, I think in one of my previous videos I may have incorrectly been talking about the Golden Dawn. Ah, man, my tongue has this thing today that kind of, my tongue hurts for some reason. I don't know what it is, but it's making my speaking kind of difficult. There is there's this thing that goes on with Pluto. If in Aquarius, the first decan of Aquarius is ruled by Venus, and what I was saying about the Golden Dawn is that I'm used to using tarot cards, that the Rider-Waite-Smith deck came out of the Golden Dawn, and that's probably the most popular tarot deck that people know. The Tarot de Marseille predates it. It's known as one of the oldest tarot decks to survive in popular use. And the Thoth, or Thoth, however you say it, tarot deck is the one that Aleister Crowley made with Frida Harris. If I get her name right, I think she has another... Harris was the name of the artist. Crowley and Harris, right? And I use the... It's not... I honestly... It's not my... I kind of would just want to go back to using the original names for all the trump cards. Like, I'm not really a fan of the way that Crowley renamed the trump cards. But other than that, I do like the Thoth tarot deck. But anyways, all the tarot decks that came out of this Golden Dawn system use this pattern of connecting the decans, which is the zodiac divided by 36, the 36 chambers, if you're into the Wu-Tang Clan, right? There's also, I mean, as a word of warning, there's also this whole shit, right? The Picatrix, which is all about this stuff, and there's some sketchy, like, black magic stuff going on with this, so I would, be careful about, I'm kind of joking, but if you look up, like, different interviews, there's whole people that, like, dedicate a whole practice towards working with the spirits that are associated with each of the decans, and that there's certain symbols and images, and even people like James Hillman and Ficino and stuff like that were drawing on the Picatrix is an actual legit magical grimoire that was compiled by, was it the Spaniards or something? But it borrows stuff from the Arabs who were, and then it's kind of this thing where it gets to this point where who knows where people are getting this stuff from. Some people say it goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, but then the history is kind of sketchy. I'm not here to be that scholarly about it, but the point is that there is a tradition with using the 36 decan images, and that it's easy to approach if you're familiar with tarot cards. And the system works in such a way that, okay, so the 5 of Swords is the decan that is associated with the first decan of Aquarius, and in the Crowley, Thoth, whatever, the Golden Dawn system, they use the word defeat, right? And then when it retrogrades back into Capricorn, what we have is the 4 of Pentacles, or the 4 of Discs, or the 4 of Dineros, or whatever you would say, right? And the 4 of Pentacles in the Crowley system is associated with the word power. And, this, in the Rider-Waite-Smith, it shows a guy who's sort of like this king kind of guy, but he's like holding all his like pentacles in such a way that he's really kind of holding on to them, right? And there's this sort of thing about kind of like miserly holding on to power, holding on to your position, defending your ground. And I've heard there's the Austin Coppock describes it as a kind of a big money decan, because it's sort of like the image of like maybe like Wall Street banking or big money power deals to get resource management, Whereas, and so this is just me trying to whatever delineate something out of this Pluto retrograde. In that, if you look at the one in Aquarius, it's a Venus. The ruler of the Aquarius decan defeat is a Venus ruled decan for Aquarius, and that. For Rider-Waite-Smith, they have an image of a guy picking up a bunch of swords, and a bunch of people are walking off in different directions, and it sort of looks like a battle just happened, and that people have called it quits, and somebody's picking up after what, and there's, I've also heard this described as being kind of like a decan that symbolizes independence, making good on your own. But there's something about the defeat kind of quality, and the sort of like Venus symbolizes peace rather than war, right? Mars is the planet, the warlike planet. Venus is all about negotiating or making a harmonious peace treaty kind of thing, right? And there's something, what I kind of intuit about this sort of Five of Swords, Venus-ruled decan with Pluto there, is that there's this kind of thing about, well, first of all, the retrograde motion back into Capricorn, and there's something about these Saturn-ruled signs of Capricorn and Aquarius that are opposite to the light of Cancer, the light of Leo, right? And that typically we look at the signs of Cancer and Leo are more idealized for, Cancer is like a motherly sign. The sign of Cancer rules the breast, and there's all this stuff about like comfort and sentimentality and the emotional compassion and all this kind of stuff. Whereas, and then Leo is kind of like the lion, the proud lion, like the leader, the regal kind of thing, right? And that and these are the signs of the luminaries, the sun and the moon, and Capricorn and Aquarius are the Saturn signs that are the winter signs opposite to it, and that Pluto. So before we had modern astrology, Saturn represented the limit, the seventh seal, right? The seventh sphere. There's a kind of like Saturn. Before we got into Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and recent modern advances, Saturn sort of represented like the end of the road kind of thing, and there's a kind of there's almost because also a numerological thing about the number 7. You have a lucky number 7. I won't get into all that right now, but as you move into these new class of modern outer planets, there is still this basic principle of distance, right? In that the sun is warm and friendly, and it's like, it's not, I was talking in my Sun Uranus video about how the sun represents both the king as well as the child, right? And that there's almost like this kind of myth around family life where once mommy and daddy create a baby, that the baby becomes like the center of the family, or the whole, what the parents do is all for the good of the child, to turn little Johnny into a productive member of society and give him a good education. And so the child is kind of like what is all this work for? What are all our worldly efforts for? So we can make a good life for our child, so that once we die, our child, continues to live a good life and do good things in the name of his parents that he remembers, and does, there's this whole kind of parental thing going on. And with this whole system, though, the Capricorn and Aquarius on the other side of the zodiac are the winter signs, which are generally, people kind of antagonize Saturn, or Saturn is seen as the cold, harsh thing, in contrast to the hot, warm thing as being the sun and the moon and stuff. And there's the whole why people like the summer and people don't like the winter, and that Saturn is seen as kind of depressing or something, and all this, right? But there's this sort of quality of the basic in tropical astrology, the cycles of the season and coming out of the winter months, and the gradual increase of light, and that the sort of like the darkness of the winter, and this whole thing about the goat, the sea goat, like Capricorn being a kind of goaty sea monster kind of creature that kind of emerges out of the darkest depths. Instead of being like the kingly regal royal lion, it's the dark sea monster emerging out of the darkest part of the year. And that there's this kind of thing about Pluto, right? Pluto stands for things like, mythologically Pluto is Hades. He was Zeus's brother, right? So Zeus is the head patriarch of the zodiac, and seen as, in astrology, he's represented by Jupiter, the greater benefic, and it's all about luck and good and generosity and good things and stuff like that. And Pluto, mythologically, Hades was Zeus's brother, right? And while Zeus got to rule over Olympus, Hades was relegated to the shadowy world of the underworld, right? And that, to be honest, in the myths, Hades is not even necessarily a bad guy. Even if you, in terms of being Hades and Zeus, maybe they're both all kind of on the same page, but like Zeus got the good job and Hades got the not so great job, and Hades is stuck in the underworld doing underworld. It's kind of like the not so pretty, not so glamorous work, that people are afraid of death, people are afraid of the underworld, and so that naturally Pluto carries a kind of the weight of fear. There's also this sort of thing about secrecy, about being hidden behind the shadows of what is unseen, or that often this whole conversation about, it kind of ties into the Freudian id, and the Jungian shadow is basically just an extension of the Freudian id, right? And this whole thing about Pluto in the Saturn signs is like Pluto in a position that is already kind of dark, but in this retrograde period, there's a going back and forth. Like, Pluto doesn't make very much progress forward before it goes backwards, and that there's a kind of a progressing out of Capricorn into Aquarius that makes Aquarius kind of more idealistic, right? That Aquarius is often kind of known for this kind of quality of having humanitarian ideals to make the world a better place, or to, whether that's futuristic, whether that's we're going to try to create a utopian better tomorrow or something. It could also be Aquarius trying to preserve something from the past, like a lost ideal. I think that could also be something that could be cool with Pluto too, is because Pluto is the underworld. It's kind of like, I'm almost getting the image, with like Lord of the Rings, where they lose the golden ring, they lose the ring, but then where is it found? It's Gollum, Schmeagol finds it in the water fishing, kind of almost by accident. It's kind of like they talk about the trash stratum, right? In that the images of divine appear at the level of the trash stratum. That's a Philip K. Dick quote. There's the whole thing about and it's also what I was saying, the Decan is power, right? And Pluto also stands for this thing about things which are really small but can be really powerful, right? And that could be seen as a secret that's small enough to keep hidden, or it could also be technological, like, the atomic bomb. They even use plutonium, right, in those atomic things, right? But there's this thing about, or technology even, like the smartphone, like we have computers that used to have a huge tower in order to, or like now it's been shrunken down so you can have it in a laptop, or you can have it in your phone, and that you have all this power just in the palm of your hand. And that power, the thing is, what does that power mean? Is it also the fact that it's power because it's basically like a hot mic? It's like carrying a bug around with you that you don't know if your phone's spying on you or not, right? You don't know if the government is listening in or not. And they say that they're not, but then how do they have so much information? How do they know how to target you with all the ads so specifically, right? And I don't know. It's, I don't know if this is a digression or not. This could be a very on point for Aquarius also has a technological side to it, but I think we'll get into that later because the Six of Swords, or Aquarius Decan number 2, is more technological than the Venus ruled Decan of Aquarius 1, right? And there's something, though, about Pluto itself. Pluto represents this sort of like the hidden power dynamics that are maybe like this. The sun is all about like in Leo is all about putting on a show. Leo wants to be seen. Leo wants to be heard. Leo is like a performer. Leo likes to, and then there's a sort of thing about like, wow, like the magician. Well, you have one hand, you're doing one kind of thing. You get the pretty girl on stage to do this stuff so all the people are kind of looking slack jawed at the nice glowy shiny thing, right? And then you can, in the shadows, you might be, that's where the real magic is happening. Your secret, the secret that you're not telling people that makes your magic trick work is happening there. And then if you can pull it off, then you have lots of power, right? Although there's something about the earth, though. When you bring in the earthiness of Capricorn, the power is often what it comes down to in our modern version of how we think about reality. I may have mentioned this before, that we have this what is real? What is reality anyways? One of the things that is an interesting hint between our subjectivity and our objectivity is that the human experience, like you might be watching this video and you see that I have a orange paint on my wall. I've got an orange room here and I've got all these colorful books or whatever. But the whole experience of color is from our own human optical nerves and how that translates the signals of light into our brain as visual images and such. But color, as we have been able to with our scientific tests, we can't really prove that color is really anything there. It's just how light gets reflected and how our own optic nerve processes it, and that if our different animals were to see the same colors, they may see something completely differently for all we know. But we do know that if we have if you have a human, a dog, and a caterpillar or whatever, and they're all looking at the same thing, that we all know that these are physical beings that occupy a certain mass, have a certain physical space, and that they're ultimately what we have come to this materialistic, as people say, material oriented view of what reality is, right? And that color, experiencing the colors is actually, which is our immediate visual perception of reality, is actually more subjective. And actually, color is something more to do with illusion and fantasy and the dream and all this kind of stuff. And that the actual objective, currently real world could be completely colorless, but very material, very, very defined by measuring the size of one object to another. And this has more mass, this has more weight, and all this kind of stuff. That apparently is how our society defines reality, right? And so there's something about Capricorn being an earth sign that I feel is very grounded in the physical, being very grounded in the actual reality of, if you have power, it's power in an earthly domain. It's power that could be like land ownership, that could be access to food, access to resources, access to clean drinking water, the actual material stuff you need to survive. And it was interesting to note that back when the pandemic kicked off, this was around the time when we had Jupiter and Mars and was it Saturn there too at the same time? Because we just had that grand conjunction that happened around the time, but this was all with Pluto in Capricorn, right? And so in Pluto and Aquarius, I feel like Pluto and Aquarius has more of this feeling of moving on from the pandemic and and putting the COVID era behind us, but this retrograde into, I keep remembering this sort of thing about the god Pan, right? The god Pan is associated with panic, associated with fear, and that when the pandemic first started, it was like you had everybody like you scrambling to go collect toilet paper for some reason, or that people were like, we need to somehow prepare ourselves materially, and that's what I think the Capricorn thing comes in. We need to materially prepare ourselves for whatever is happening and defend ourselves against the material reality of these viruses. And but the thing is, there's Pluto it comes out as the god Pan and being this kind of animalistic kind of fear thing. Our instincts, right? Of the id, the unconscious instincts and stuff like that. And it can be very irrational, but there's this sort of like this basic kind of root chakra thing going on, I feel, right? With Pluto, the id, the survival drive, and that power in this sense isn't necessarily like a power of ideology. It's not a power of persuasion, right? Of the power of being able to charm people. This is the power of basic what you got. Like you got land, you got food, you got water, you got clean air to breathe or not, right? And that you can have money in the bank, but I think money is to me feels like an abstraction. You know, because essentially, people think money is what makes the world go round, but I honestly don't think that money is nearly as important as people make it out to be, and that it's kind of a silly game to spend your life chasing money around when there's probably much more important things, right? And I don't know. It'll be interesting. The whole thing about it's going to go back and forth a bit because it's going to, like I said, in January 21st, 2024, it's going to ingress back into Aquarius. And then later on in 2024, it's going to go back to Capricorn again, you know, for a shorter period of time. And then in Aquarius, it's all about defeat, right? Which is, I mean, you know, I don't know how many astrology video, you know, how many subscribers I'm going to get for talking about defeat so much, but I think there's something, what I think about there's something about this sort of squabbling over power, over survival, over resources, and the hidden secret levels at which those power plays go on. But with Venus, the Venus ruled Decan of Aquarius 1, there's something I feel it's kind of like there's an Aquarian ideal to peace and harmony. And, you know, my dad was an Aquarius and he would say, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, that kind of thing. And there's certain thing where the secrecy of Pluto, where in Capricorn 3, the secrecy of Pluto may be secret so it can pull some kind of trick to rig pull the strings and to have some sort of control and power over what's going on. I feel like once Pluto is in Aquarius, it's like the secrecy is more like, well, we're not going to talk about all that power play stuff. You know, we're not going to talk about the corruption of government, or we're not going to talk about how, we're trying to present ourselves as the solar people. We're all about love and light and the leadership into the brighter tomorrow and all this kind of stuff. This Capricorn with Aquarius, I think there could be kind of like, you know, we're just not going to talk about all the corruption, and we're just going to, there could be things where people, there's certain things where you're kind of like, there's no point trying to win this battle, right? It's kind of like the choose your battle thing, and to peacefully, you know, maybe it could be like agree to disagree over certain issues, or it could be trying to, it's like creating a sense of moving on, right? In that, if we're going to move towards a better idealistic Aquarian tomorrow, we have to let bygones be bygones and let the crappy stuff that happened, the injustices, we have to just kind of forgive and forget and move on to a better tomorrow, because we can't fix what happened in the past. But what's interesting is that with astrology, we have the gift of foresight, in that we're talking about what's going to happen once Pluto's back in Aquarius, and now that we've got the rest of the year that Pluto's going to be in Capricorn, and all the dirty power play, the intimidation, the secrets, like apparently China does this stuff where they threaten people's families. They like threaten the families of foreign diplomats, and then apparently the Canadian government is like, their only way to deal with it is to not have an incompetent intelligence system so that nobody really gets the message. And that apparently it was like, my mom was telling me about this. Apparently there's this whole controversy with Chinese diplomats threatening the family of this government official, and the government official, like the Canadian spy agency knew, but like there's all these people that aren't checking their emails, and that it's kind of this like, I didn't get the memo, and that like this is called like, and then they're like, well, that's in the past now. Let's just move. This sort of Aquarian, like, I think the Aquarians have this kind of like sense of being aloof. But it could be like, you gotta watch out. It could be like aloof as an avoidance mechanism. Like, oh well, we don't drudge up all that old business. That's in the past. We just have to move on and all this. And like that's what's gonna. I think that is Pluto and Aquarius versus Pluto and Capricorn is actually like making doing the dirty business, right? And so I don't know what I'm doing for it. What am I saying for this video? Now, but the rest of your year is for you to pull your mafioso intimidation tactics and make your big power plays and be as corrupt. And then when Aquarius comes, you get to brush it all underneath the table and be like, we were just here for we're trying to make the world a better place. Please forget what we did in the second half of 2023. It's like, this is what I mean. For the gift of foresight in astrology, this is something to watch out for. Maybe there's another thing about this. I'm half an hour through. I was also going to say that while Pluto is retrograde in Capricorn, don't forget that we have Neptune in Pisces, and Neptune in Pisces is sitting. Let me just look at my. I think it's like around 27 right now. Neptune in Pisces at 27 Pisces. And so there's only a few degrees from 29 Capricorn to 27. So over the course of the summer, it's going to be defined by a fairly tight sextile aspect between Pluto in Capricorn and Neptune in Pisces, right? And so Pluto is all about this sort of like power and corruption and the hidden id forces in the underworld and what we cover up and what the secrets that only come out in dreams and nightmares and stuff. Whereas Neptune is also kind of dreamy, but it's kind of more about, in Macbeth there's this line with like, will Neptune's oceans wash my hands clean of these deeds, whatever. I'm probably not quoting it right, but there's this thing about the Neptune the Redeemer, right? That there's an idea of spiritual salvation with Neptune and kind of forgiveness. It's in this watery sign of Pisces, and there's a kind of a emotional, compassionate thing that comes in with Pisces, and there's this there's a sort of, but it's kind of weird though, because Pluto is going to be here in Capricorn in the power Decan, and meanwhile Neptune is going to be in Pisces 3, which is the 10 of Cups, which is, in Rider-Waite-Smith, it's the one where they're looking at the rainbow, and it's kind of like this sort of idealistic, like, Jesus forgives all of our sins will be forgiven, will be washed away in the waters of Neptune, and, it's really all just love. And so I think there's a problem here that you got to watch out for, where the Neptune may wash over the corruption of Pluto, or that we may be trying to get all our ducks in a row in a material sense to achieve a dream that is Neptunian, that's a kind of a vision of, but the vision may be a kind of illusion and may be fleeting, or we may be trying to recreate, there's often this sort of like, child mother thing that they bring with Neptune. I don't know about that, but like this idea of the anima, that you're trying to what is your desire after anyways, and that are we just chasing phantoms, are we just chasing ghosts, are we just chasing idealized images, and that we will do, you gotta watch to make sure that you're not doing unethical things in building up power to, you know, it's like Citizen Kane, right? With the Rosebud, where this guy's a big tycoon, he's a big millionaire, but what's at the end of the day, what's driving him is this sort of weird fantasy image of Rosebud, the slave. This is trying to recapture this childhood innocence and naivety, but you know, and then the polarity between that and being like a big like a baron or a tycoon, or you know, like I think those are the dynamics that are going to be highlighted. The appeal to innocence, the appeal to redemption, the appeal to forgiveness, and then the kind of underhanded kind of power plays of Pluto in Capricorn. Okay, so this is my take on Pluto retrograde. Thank you very much, and please like and subscribe, and help to encourage me to make more astrology videos and keep going. Thank you very much.